I have to apologize for this past week because I have been late in making a lot of these videos. The stories have been breaking and I haven't been covering them. I have had some issues with my microphone particularly, and I've had, quite a few things to sort out. So, aside from the whole microphone issue, the microphone issue has been sorted now. It was static in the microphone for those of you who wanted to know. I managed to sort it. I was baffled as to what the hell it was, but the microphone's made out of metal. It picked up some static. I got rid of the static and the noise went away. So back to normal. Anyway, as I say, I'm a little bit behind. And one of the things that happened in the past few days was the Joshua Klitschko press conference in New York. And I've been finding it interesting watching the body language and the behavior of both of these men in the build up to this fight. Anthony Joshua, to me, seems he seems uneasy to me. Let's just put it that way. To me, he does not seem as comfortable and as relaxed as Wladimir Klitschko. And Joshua is talking about mind games, and Klitschko is definitely playing mind games. His mind games are subtle. They're not Tyson Fury type mind games. They're subtle mind games where he tries to kind of subtly belittle his opponent. This is something Wladimir likes to do. And the way he talks to Joshua, he does kind of talk to him as if he's talking to a child. He does kind of talk down to him. He does it in a subtle way, but those of you who are observant and know what you're looking at will understand what I'm saying. And Joshua hasn't really turned against that. He hasn't really rebelled against that. He hasn't really pushed back from what I've seen so far. Now, I've often said in many of my videos that all this pre-fight stuff is irrelevant. When you've got two experienced fighters getting in the ring, all the pre-fight hype and all the chat and all the mind games are not really going to matter because the two guys are too experienced to allow it to matter. And in fact, they're usually just doing that kind of stuff to sell tickets. They know it's not going to work on their opponent more often than not. Sometimes there are exceptions, but the majority of times when you get two very experienced high-level fighters, mind games are just never going to work because they've been there, seen it and done it. Now, I would say that the mind games that Fury played on Klitschko did work because Klitschko, as extremely talented as he is, he's always been vulnerable mentally. He's not as tough as a Tyson Fury. He's not as tough as his brother Wladimir mentally. So I think even as experienced as Klitschko is, if there is an opponent who is extremely hard-headed, who's extremely mentally strong, they can still get to Klitschko mentally. But Anthony Joshua is the exact type of personality that Klitschko likes to be up against. Somebody who's polite, respectful, who is respectful with him, who is in admiration of him in terms of his achievements and what he's done. Those are the kind of guys that Klitschko finds it easy to manipulate mentally and to control mentally. And once he's controlling you mentally before the fight, it makes it easier for him to control you mentally and physically in the fight. And anybody who is rooting for Joshua, this should be a concern for you because, as I was saying, mind games may not work very often on high-level experienced fighters. But Anthony Joshua is not an experienced fighter. He's very inexperienced, particularly at this level. So somebody like him, he may fall for mind games. I know he's very intelligent, Anthony Joshua. He's a very, very bright young man, very bright. And I've been very impressed with Joshua's mental maturity throughout his career to this point. Even though he hasn't faced the highest level competition, the amount of pressure that he's been under, with all the eyes of the public watching him, his ability to hold it together and remain calm under all that pressure, under all those expectations, to me has been very, very impressive. So this is a guy who mentally is stronger than your average up and coming, being groomed superstar in boxing. Very strong mentally, Anthony Joshua so far. But even as strong as he is mentally, as calm as he's been, this is another level again. We're going to have to see if he's going to crack or if he's going to be able to maintain under this pressure that he will be under, for the Klitschko fight. Now, in terms of mind games, in terms of opponents trying to get under his skin, there's only one opponent so far that did it successfully, and that was Dillian Whyte. And in the Dillian Whyte fight, Joshua certainly didn't freeze. In fact, the opposite. He came out all guns blazing with reckless abandon. And because he was so emotionally involved in the Whyte fight and he was throwing absolute haymakers from the opening bell, that's the reason why the fight turned out to be harder for him than it really should have been, particularly against an injured Dillian Whyte, an out of shape and injured Dillian Whyte. Against Klitschko, I don't expect him to fight in such a reckless fashion. In fact, I expect there to be a greater danger of him actually going the opposite way and instead going into his shell mentally rather than, seeing red mist and flying at Klitschko the way he flew at Dillian Whyte. So I'll be watching Anthony Joshua very closely, as I have been in the build up to this fight, to see if there are any telltale signs that all is not well in Anthony Joshua's mind. I can see him trying to hold it together. I can see him trying to rationalize and contextualize the whole situation and saying to himself, it's justified. Yeah, this guy's experienced, so on and so forth, but I've got this. He's an old man. It's justified, so on and so forth. He is trying to be aware of Klitschko's mind games and the psychological tactics he's trying to play. I just feel at some point he's going to have to push back against Klitschko a little bit, because this dynamic that they have between them, where Klitschko's like the older patronizing brother to Anthony Joshua, I don't like Joshua going into the fight with that type of mentality. It's almost as if Klitschko is overbearing. And again, it's like he's patronizing Joshua all the time. Maybe Joshua will use it to his advantage. Maybe he'll use it like Lennox Lewis used it when he fought Hasim Rahman, because Hasim Rahman was really clowning Lewis before their rematch. And Lewis, they had a little brawl in the studio, but other than that, Lewis held it all in. On the actual night of the fight, Hasim Rahman was actually trying to get into Lewis's dressing room before the fight to go in there and I guess try and intimidate him. He had his people banging on Lewis's dressing room door and so on and so forth. Lewis didn't take the bait. He held it all in and he expressed himself in the ring. He actually saw Rahman's antics pre-fight as a sign of weakness, a sign that he was nervous because he felt as though he needed to try and intimidate the guy. Maybe Joshua will see that as something similar with Klitschko, that Klitschko's trying to pull all these mind games and do all these antics, and he sees that as a sign of weakness. So all he needs to do is just stay focused on what he is intending for the fight itself and forget about all the mind games that Klitschko wants to play. We'll see. But I do find it very interesting, and it really is crunch time for Anthony Joshua. If he wins this fight, which I think he can, I'm not saying he will, but I think he does have the ability. It's difficult to know. And this is why the fight is so interesting. It's difficult to know because will Klitschko have deteriorated significantly since the Fury fight, or will he have improved? Some people say that the reason why he was so poor in the Fury fight, aside from Fury's good boxing skills and his tactics, had something to do with Klitschko's wife, Hayden, whatever her name is, having some type of issue with a child, a miscarriage or something. I don't know what it was. Maybe it wasn't a miscarriage. Maybe it was postnatal depression, something like that. So some people have blamed it on that. Me personally, I just saw it as Klitschko being Klitschko and not wanting to take any risks and being in there with a guy with such a long reach and a guy who's so mentally strong and with such good boxing skills that can move like a Fury. it just negated everything that Klitschko did. And he's never been a guy to take risks if you don't see a path with minimum resistance. That's just how he's always been. He's had plenty of fights in the past where he's thrown hardly any punches. Go back and look at the Sultan Ibragimov fight. And let's just put it this way. If Klitschko was just coming off the Kubrat Pulev fight, let's say the Pulev fight was 3 months ago, and he was going into this fight right here with Joshua at wherever Joshua is now, 17 or 18-0. I'd be picking Klitschko, definitely. Definitely. Because he would have been active, he would have been coming off a great win. I'd definitely be going with Klitschko in this fight. The reason I'm not so sure about Klitschko winning is, again, the big layoff that he's had. And also the performance that Klitschko had before fighting Tyson Fury. He fought Bryant Jennings. Now go look at the Jennings fight. I know Jennings can do certain things that Joshua can't do, but still, just imagine, go remind yourselves, go watch the Jennings fight and ask yourselves the question, if that was Joshua in there instead of Jennings, would Klitschko have had his hand raised at the end of that fight? I think there are serious doubts about that. The Jennings performance by Klitschko was poor against a guy in Jennings who's not really a great offensive fighter. Not really a big puncher. Certainly not a big heavyweight. Nowhere near as big and powerful as Anthony Joshua. And he never came close to getting knocked out by Klitschko. Never came close to going down. And actually came on quite strong in the second half of the fight. If that had been Joshua in there instead of Jennings, do you really think that Klitschko would have won? Just some food for thought. Drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel. It's your boy Hatman. I'm out.